We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com.
John J. on Facebook. John snagged an SVS 20-30 PCI subwoofer off of eBay. Nice. The seller didn't include the manual, and SVS's website doesn't have the manual for this older model posted anymore. Could we run through the settings he should use as a starting point for all the knobs and switches on the amplifier? He'll be connecting it to a Denon AVR 1910 receiver.
Yeah, so first of all, luckily there is that site manualslib.com that archives lots of manuals out there. They had an archive of this one now. They listed as the SVS 1646 PCI, but that's because the manual applied to all of their cylinder models back then. They had the same settings on any of the amplifiers. They just changed the actual height of each cylinder as they went along in their model lineup. So those were the old cylinder SVS subs. The current SVS website doesn't stock those manuals anymore, but the manual was available. But that's not tremendously important.
Is his going to be like there's a 2039 and a 2531 back in this owner's guide that you are linking to?
Yeah, it's applicable to all. So
is his more like the 2039 or the 2531? Is his the short one or the
like
mid-size one?
2039 would be this. It
Probably
might even be the
mid-size
2039. That might be a typo that we put in there. It might be the 2039.
Oh, maybe it is. Then
I think that's what it is. So anyway, that manual applies. I already emailed it to him, so that's fine. But these were, a little bit simpler amplifiers. They just had your basic knobs and switches. And so it wasn't tremendously difficult to say what your settings should be. And this will apply to any of your simpler setup ones. Generally what you want to do, now he's got a Denon AVR 1910. That means it's an AV receiver that has bass management. It will handle all of the crossover stuff and the filtering to make sure that really high frequencies aren't getting sent to your subwoofer and that the low frequencies from all of your speakers are getting sent to the subwoofer.
So the right stuff is going to go to the subwoofer.
That's right. So you don't have to worry about trying to use a filter in the subwoofer to do that kind of stuff. It's already being handled. So the first one, the volume knob, as always, they say set it to about the 50% mark, about halfway, just as a starting point. But that's what he's asking. Where should he start? So start with it at about halfway up. There'll be a knob labeled crossover. Turn that all the way up as high as it can possibly go, because that basically deactivates it as a filter. Now
takes that low pass out.
That's right. So you don't want that active. There is a switch on the back of this to actually deactivate the crossover entirely. So deactivate the crossover.
Yeah, you don't need it at all.
I always say turn the crossover knob all the way up anyway. Just leave it there, then actually hit that switch to deactivate the crossover. Then there is a phase switch, a polarity switch, 0, 180 degrees. Leave that at 0. If it's a fully variable phase knob, leave it at 0. There's not really any reason to go anywhere different from 0. And that's kind of about it. On the back, there isn't much else to do. So those are your starting points. Now, the one that you might adjust would be your volume knob. You're gonna play the built-in trim level test tone. Hopefully, have an SPL meter that you can look at, one that is C weighted. So you're gonna sit in your seat with that C weighted SPL meter. You're gonna play the internal test tone, and you're gonna adjust it in the volume knob on the back of the sub until you get 75 dB as the reading on that SPL meter. So that should be the only one you need to adjust after that starting point.
There you go. That's actually not too difficult.
No,
it makes sense.
Not bad.
I guess the question would be the C-weighted audio meter recommendation there.
Yeah, it's a little bit hard. We used to always just say Radio Shack, but Radio Shack isn't really around anymore.
Not so much.
Yeah, there's a company called Galaxy Audio. Actually, if you go over to our good friends at Cross Spectrum Labs, they have our favorite one, Galaxy Audio. I think it's the C140, but that might be a little bit more expensive than what people want to spend. If you just go to Amazon, search for an SPL meter, just make sure it's one that has C weighting. They're not complicated devices, so there's not.
So you don't have to worry too much about particular brand names.
Nah, not really.
Any Chinese factory can make one.
Yes.
Okay. All right. With his older subwoofer, he took the subwoofer output from his receiver, connected that to a Y splitter, and then plugged the Y splitter into both the left and right RCA inputs on his subwoofer. Is this doing anything either beneficial or detrimental? Should he do the same thing with his SVS 20-39 PCI?
It is 39.
It's
See,
20-39. I just saw that.
It was a typo. That's right.
So we got it right. I'm going to guess that that is just unnecessary, and it's really not hurting anything because it's just going to combine them again.
Yeah.
Because if you plug it in just to the left, won't that be mono in most pieces of equipment?
Yeah, I mean, okay. So I'm trying to think how to phrase this, but typically it doesn't matter. Typically with a subwoofer, whether you plug it into the left input or the right input makes absolutely no difference to the ultimate thing. Now, there are some subwoofers out there that actually provide a high pass filter. So you plug the left channel into the left input, it applies a low pass filter which is fed to the subwoofer and a high pass filter which is then fed to a speaker output. Right? So if that's the setup, then you should use this Y splitter thing because it's expecting to see a signal on both inputs. But it's only for subwoofers that offer an actual high pass filter, which is meant to then be output and passed along to speakers. And that's kind of a rarity. Now, in this case, with the 2039 PCI, since I did find this archive version of the manual, they explicitly state in several places throughout the manual, plug it into one input, it doesn't matter which one.
Oh, okay, doesn't matter.
Because they clearly, over at the old version of SVS, had this question come into them. Because
they probably got sick of it, yes.
They put that in multiple times throughout the manual.
Right. Because it's a good question. I mean, there's two inputs there. Do I need to feed them both?
Yeah.
You know,
but they explicitly state for this one, just one, doesn't matter which one. So
excellent. So pick which one you like the look of.
Yeah.
You can be political about it. You can pick left or right. Whatever makes you happy. All right.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.